The rain falls in sheets across a sleepy suburban neighborhood, turning the world into a blurred watercolor painting of grays and blues. On Maple Street, where nothing remarkable ever happens, Eleanor Matthews stares out her kitchen window, a retired librarian whose quiet days have become as predictable as the ticking of her antique wall clock. A flash of movement catches her eye. Through the rain-streaked glass, she spots an orange tabby cat on her porch, soaked to the bone, its fur darkened and matted against its thin frame. But this is no ordinary visitor seeking shelter from the storm. The cat paces frantically, its tail twitching with nervous energy, its desperate meows barely audible over the drumming of raindrops on the roof. Eleanor watches, transfixed, as the animal disappears briefly into the bushes beside her porch, only to return dragging something nearly half its size, a small mud-caked duffel bag with frayed edges and a torn zipper. "Arthur, come look at this," Eleanor calls to her husband, her voice barely above a whisper. Arthur joins her at the window, his weathered face creasing with confusion. "What in the world?" The cat positions the bag directly on their welcome mat, then steps back, staring at the door with an intelligence that sends a chill down Eleanor's spine. As if on cue, the duffel bag twitches, once, twice, then falls still again. "There's something alive in there," Arthur breathes, reaching for the doorknob. Eleanor hesitates, her hand on her husband's arm. Should we call someone? But the cat's plaintive cry cuts through her caution, a sound so full of desperation that Eleanor feels it in her chest. 68 years of careful living, of never taking risks, and yet something about this moment demands action. The door creaks open. The cat doesn't run. Instead, it looks up at them with amber eyes that seem to hold a universe of secrets. Another twitch from the bag, more violent this time, accompanied by a muffled sound that might be a whimper. Rain soaks into Eleanor's house slippers as she steps onto the porch. The world seems to hold its breath as she kneels down, hands trembling, and reaches for the zipper of the mysterious package that has literally been dragged to her doorstep. What she finds inside will shatter the peaceful predictability of her retirement, drawing her into a mystery deeper and more extraordinary than anything in the novels that line her bookshelves. For in this moment, as thunder rolls across the sky and lightning illuminates the strange tableau on her porch, Eleanor Matthews doesn't yet realize that this sodden cat hasn't just brought her a package. It's brought her a choice between turning away from something inexplicable or stepping into a story more incredible than she could ever imagine. The zipper parts with a sound that seems to echo in the rain-drenched silence. Eleanor's fingers tremble as she peels back the worn fabric, revealing what lies within the mysterious bag dragged to her doorstep by a desperate mother cat. What she discovers steals the very breath from her lungs. 4 tiny kittens lie huddled together, their bodies barely larger than Eleanor's palm, fur still damp with the newness of life. But there is no movement, no mewling cries that should accompany such young creatures. Their tiny forms are motionless, their skin pale and cold against the rough fabric of the duffel bag. "Arthur," Eleanor whispers, her voice breaking. They're not moving." The mother cat pushes forward, her amber eyes fixed not on Eleanor but on her precious cargo. She emits a sound so filled with anguish it seems to pierce the very air around them. Not quite a meow, not quite a cry, but something primal that transcends the barrier between species. A mother's desperate plea that needs no translation. Arthur kneels beside his wife, rain soaking through his sweater as he gently touches one of the kittens with a weathered finger. "This one's breathing," he says, hope kindling in his voice. "Barely, but it's alive." Lightning flashes across the sky, illuminating the scene in stark relief. An elderly couple crouched on their porch, a mother cat standing sentinel, and 4 tiny lives balanced on the knife's edge between existence and oblivion. "We need to get them warm," Eleanor says, decision crystallizing in her voice. "Now!" In one fluid motion, she gathers the duffel bag into her arms, feeling the almost imperceptible weight of the kittens within. The mother cat follows as Eleanor crosses the threshold into the warmth of their home, a boundary that, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. Time seems to compress as Arthur clears the kitchen table, as Eleanor retrieves the heating pad from the bathroom cabinet, as they work in silent, urgent synchronicity. The mother cat never takes her eyes off her babies, her entire body vibrating with an intensity that fills the room. Will these tiny flames of life be extinguished before they've truly had a chance to burn? Or will this moment, this unexpected arrival on a rain-soaked morning, become the first chapter in an extraordinary story of survival. The clock ticks, the rain falls, and 4 tiny hearts struggle to keep beating. The Matthews' cozy home transforms into an emergency sanctuary as Eleanor and Arthur move with unexpected urgency. Their hands, once slowed by age, now fly with purposeful precision as they fight for 4 flickering lives that hang by the thinnest of threads. "The heating pad, Arthur. Set it to low," Eleanor instructs, her voice steady despite the storm of emotion behind her eyes. She cradles the smallest kitten in her palm, its tiny body no larger than a computer mouse, its breath so shallow they're almost imperceptible. Arthur rushes to the linen closet, pulling out the softest towels they own, the special ones Eleanor hadn't used since their daughter's wedding. Neither speaks of this as he carefully wraps each kitten in warm cotton, creating a nest of hope on their kitchen table. The mother cat circles anxiously, her mud-caked paws leaving prints on the hardwood floor. Prince Eleanor doesn't even notice as she dials the veterinarian with trembling fingers. The world outside continues to pour rain, but inside this home, time has distilled to its purest form. Each heartbeat, each tiny breath becomes a victory. As Arthur prepares formula from an emergency kit they've kept since their own cat Maisie passed 3 months ago, Eleanor's mind drifts back to that day. The empty cat bed she still couldn't bring herself to put away, the unopened bag of food in the pantry, the devastating silence in corners once filled with purring. The grief, still raw, rises in her throat. "Eleanor?" Arthur's gentle voice pulls her back. The smallest one. She moved her paw. A spark ignites in Eleanor's chest as she fills the tiny dropper with warm formula. With delicate movements that belie her 70-year-old hands, she places a single drop on the kitten's mouth, watching with bated breath as a tiny pink tongue darts out reflexively. "That's it," she whispers, tears welling. "That's it, little one." The mother cat meows plaintively from the floor, her amber eyes never leaving her babies. Eleanor nods to Arthur, who gently lifts her onto the table. Immediately, the mother curls her body around the towel-wrapped kittens, her purr reverberating through the kitchen, a sound of both anxiety and hope. Eleanor meets Arthur's gaze across the table, a wordless communication flowing between them. They had lost so much, but perhaps fate has brought them this moment not as cruel coincidence, but as a chance for healing, for the desperate mother cat, for the struggling kittens, and perhaps for themselves. Outside, the storm begins to ease, but the one inside Eleanor's heart, the one that has raged since Maisie's passing, finally, imperceptibly, begins to calm. As dawn breaks over the Matthews home, golden light spills across the kitchen where an unlikely family has formed overnight. The smallest kitten, now nursing weakly but steadily, rests in Eleanor's palm while Arthur refreshes the warming towels. The mother cat, whom they've started calling Messenger, watches with unwavering attention, her posture relaxed for the first time since her desperate arrival. "They're fighters," Arthur says, gently stroking the head of a gray kitten that mewls in response, a precious sound that seemed impossible just hours before. Eleanor nods, her eyes revealing a night without sleep, but her face alight with something that resembles peace. As she reaches for the discarded duffel bag to find something softer for the kitten's makeshift nest, her fingers brush against an unusual texture inside the lining. "Arthur," she whispers, "there's something here." The rainwater has dried, revealing what was hidden before. A section of the bag's interior seam has been carefully cut and re-sewn. Eleanor's librarian fingers, precise from decades of handling delicate pages, work the crude stitches until they reveal a hidden pocket. From within, she extracts a scrap of fabric, no larger than a playing card. The room seems to hold its breath as Eleanor turns the fabric over, revealing handwriting, hurried, desperate strokes of blue ink against faded cotton. "Please help them. She's all they have." 7 words that transform this morning's rescue into something far more mysterious. Who would do this? Arthur wonders aloud, his voice barely audible. Who would send kittens this way? And why? The mother cat messenger meets Eleanor's gaze with those intelligent amber eyes, as if she holds the answers but lacks the voice to share them. She was no ordinary stray. Her coat, though soaked and muddied, shows signs of care. Her trust in humans speaks of a life spent among them. Eleanor's mind fills with possibilities, each more extraordinary than the last. Did someone in danger entrust their beloved pet with their newborn's lives? Was Messenger sent specifically to this house, To these people who still had an unused bag of cat food in their pantry, an emptiness in their hearts? As Arthur carefully returns the kittens to their watchful mother, Eleanor studies the cryptic message once more. Outside their window, the neighborhood stirs to life, unaware of the mystery unfolding within these walls. Cars drive past, sprinklers start their morning dance, people walk dogs along rain-washed sidewalks. Somewhere out there is an answer. Somewhere is the beginning of this story. And Eleanor realizes with a certainty that settles in her bones that she must find it. As days melt into nights and back into days, something extraordinary unfolds within the walls of the Matthews home. Messenger, once vigilant to the point of exhaustion, now allows Eleanor to stroke her head while she nurses her kittens. The transformation happens in small, precious moments, a slow blink of trust, a gentle purr, the subtle shift of moving closer rather than away. "She knows," Arthur whispers one evening, watching as his wife prepares formula for the smallest kitten who still needs supplemental feeding. "She knows we're trying to help." Eleanor nods, understanding flowing between them like silent music. 3 days ago, they were simply an elderly couple navigating the quiet waters of retirement. Now, they move through their home with renewed purpose, their kitchen transformed into a nursery where 4 tiny lives grow stronger by the hour. The gray kitten, whom Arthur has begun calling Storm, opens his eyes first, tiny slits of brilliant blue that seem to contain universes. He mews with surprising strength when Eleanor approaches, his little paws kneading the air in greeting. "Hello there," she whispers, her heart expanding in her chest. "Welcome to the world." The others follow, the calico they call Patchwork, the orange tabby Ember, and finally, the smallest, a black kitten with a single white spot on her chest whom Eleanor has named Wish. Each awakening feels like a miracle, each tiny voice of victory against impossible odds. Messenger watches it all, her amber eyes following Eleanor and Arthur as they move through their careful routines. When Arthur sits in his armchair with the newspaper, she jumps up beside him, settling into a careful circle while keeping her gaze fixed on the basket where her kittens sleep. When Eleanor prepares dinner, the cat rubs against her ankles, a silent acknowledgement of their unlikely alliance. At night, when the house grows quiet and moonlight spills across the floor, Eleanor sometimes finds herself sitting beside the basket, watching tiny chests rise and fall. Messenger joins her, their breathing synchronizing in the darkness. Neither moves, neither speaks, human and feline, bound by something that transcends language. "We still don't know where she came from," Arthur says one morning, coffee mug warming his hands as he watches Wishbat playfully at her mother's tail. Eleanor smiles, a quiet certainty settling in her chest as Messenger meets her gaze across the room, those intelligent eyes holding secrets still untold. "No," she replies, "but I think I know why she's here." In the gentle light of early evening, Eleanor stands at her bedroom window, watching Messenger teach her kittens how to play in the cardboard box that now serves as their expanding world. Their tiny bodies tumble and pounce with newfound strength, a sight that draws a smile to her lips even as tears gather in her eyes. Behind her, the closet door stands ajar, open for the first time in 3 years. Inside, a carefully preserved collection of photographs, drawings, and small mementos surrounds a framed picture of a young woman with Eleanor's eyes and a radiant smile. Sarah, their only daughter, forever frozen at 26. Arthur appears in the doorway, his steps faltering when he notices the open closet, the artifacts of grief carefully arranged on the bed. "I found Sarah's old veterinary textbooks," Eleanor says, her voice steady despite the emotion that ripples beneath her words. "I thought they might help us understand what the kittens need as they grow." Arthur crosses the room slowly, taking his wife's hand as they both gaze at the photograph. Sarah, who had been just months away from completing veterinary school when the accident happened. Sarah, who had brought home every stray creature since she was 5 years old. Sarah, whose absence had turned their home into a mausoleum of carefully preserved memories and carefully avoided conversations. "She would have known exactly what to do for them," Arthur says softly. Eleanor nods, reaching for a drawing pinned beside the photograph, a child's rendering of a family, mother, father, daughter, and a menagerie of animals that Sarah had dreamed of saving one day. "I used to think about her every day," Eleanor whispers. "And then, at some point, I started thinking about not thinking about her, as if remembering her would Would break everything open again, Arthur finishes, his own eyes glistening. Below them, Wish the smallest kitten attempts to scale the side of the box, tumbling backward in a comic display of determination that reminds Eleanor so powerfully of Sarah's stubborn spirit that she gasps. When Messenger brought those kittens, Eleanor says, when I held that tiny life in my hands and felt how fragile it was, how close to slipping away. Her voice breaks. It was like holding a piece of Sarah again. That same fight, that same chance to not let go this time. Arthur wraps his arm around his wife's shoulders as they watch the kittens below, these tiny creatures who have somehow found their way through Eleanor's carefully constructed walls. She would have loved them, Arthur says. Eleanor leans against him, allowing herself, at last, to remember without breaking. Yes, she whispers, and I think perhaps she sent them. The mystery of Messenger's origins haunts Eleanor like a melody half-remembered. 2 weeks after the rain-soaked arrival that changed everything, she sits at her computer, the strange fabric scrap with its cryptic message resting beside her keyboard. The kittens sleep in their upgraded playpen nearby, their tiny bodies now plump with health, while Messenger watches Eleanor with those knowing amber eyes. Someone must be missing you, Eleanor whispers to the cat. Someone must know where you came from. With fingers that hesitate over each key, Eleanor crafts a post for the neighborhood's online community board. She describes the tabby cat, the duffel bag, the hidden message, and the miraculous survival of 4 tiny lives. She doesn't mention Sarah, or how these creatures have filled her home with sounds she thought she'd never welcome again. Some truths are too sacred for public sharing. Arthur brings her tea, resting his hand on her shoulder as she presses submit. Do you think anyone will respond? Eleanor covers his hand with hers. Someone must know something. The answer comes just before midnight, a private message from Eliza Johnson, whose backyard borders the wooded area behind their neighborhood. I think your cat belonged to Miss Abernathy at 1642 Willow Lane. She passed away 3 weeks ago. She cared for many strays, especially one orange tabby who never left her side. In the blue glow of the computer screen, Eleanor reads the message again and again, pieces falling into place like a puzzle finally revealing its picture. Miss Abernathy, the elderly woman Eleanor had seen occasionally at the supermarket, but never spoken to. A woman who lived alone at the edge of the neighborhood, whose yard had always been filled with dishes of food and makeshift shelters. She died alone, Eleanor whispers to Arthur as they stand in their kitchen, the message printed and held between them. And Messenger was her companion. The message in the bag, Arthur says, realization dawning in his eyes. It must have been prepared by Miss Abernathy, a final act of love for her cat, knowing she might not be there much longer. Eleanor glances at Messenger, who meets her gaze with steady eyes that seem to hold both grief and gratitude. How far had this devoted mother traveled, navigating streets and dangers, guided by some inexplicable instinct that led her to their doorstep? She chose us, Eleanor says, certainty settling in her voice. Of all the homes she could have approached, she brought her babies here. Arthur nods, understanding the weight of this trust. She knew somehow that we needed them as much as they needed us. Outside, stars punctuate the velvet sky, bearing silent witness to the extraordinary journey of a mother's love. A journey that began in loss but has somehow, against all odds, led to healing for souls on both sides of the species divide. Summer sunlight streams through the windows of the Matthews home, painting golden patterns across the living room floor, where once there was only emptiness. Now this space pulses with life, with tiny paws that scamper across hardwood, with gentle purrs that fill the silence, with a family reborn from the ashes of mutual loss. Eleanor kneels beside the bay window, where Arthur has spent the last week building a magnificent cat tree. Each level carefully designed, each surface covered in soft fabric salvaged from Sarah's old blankets. Messenger watches from her perch atop the bookshelf, her amber eyes following Eleanor's movements with a trust so complete, it seems they've been together for years, not mere months. Do you think they'll like it? Arthur asks, stepping back to admire his handiwork. His hands, once restless with grief, now bear the proud scratches and calluses of renewed purpose. Before Eleanor can answer, Storm, no longer tiny but growing into a sleek gray adolescent, launches himself onto the lowest platform, followed quickly by his siblings. Ember races to the highest perch, her orange fur catching the light like living flame. Patchwork and Wish tumble together through a carpeted tunnel, their joyful scuffling punctuated by chirps and mews that sound remarkably like laughter. "I think that's your answer," Eleanor says, her smile reaching her eyes in a way it hadn't for years before these creatures entered their lives. On the mantelpiece, two framed photographs now stand side by side, Sarah in her veterinary school white coat, and beside it, a new picture taken just last week, Eleanor and Arthur surrounded by their feline family, Messenger regally positioned between them. Two families, merged into one by forces beyond understanding but perfectly felt. That evening, as twilight softens the edges of the world, Eleanor sits in Sarah's old reading nook, now lined with cushions that bear evidence of cat hair and contentment. Wish curls in her lap, purring with such intensity that Eleanor feels it resonating in her own chest. From the kitchen comes the sound of Arthur preparing dinner, his humming accompaniment to the domestic symphony their home has become. Messenger jumps up beside them, pressing her warm body against Eleanor's side. The cat who once dragged a desperate duffel bag through rain and uncertainty now carries herself with the quiet dignity of one who has found her rightful place. She kneads Eleanor's thigh gently before settling down, her eyes slowly blinking closed in the ultimate gesture of feline trust. "You found us," Eleanor whispers, stroking the cat's soft head. "Or perhaps we found each other." Outside, stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that witnessed Messenger's desperate journey months ago, now shining down on a home where loss has transformed into belonging, where emptiness has given way to fullness, where a temporary refuge has become, simply and eternally, home. Autumn paints the neighborhood in amber and gold, mirroring the eyes of a certain tabby cat who sits regally in the bay window of the Matthews home. 1 year has passed since a rain-soaked miracle arrived on their doorstep. 1 year since Eleanor and Arthur opened not just their door, but their wounded hearts to a desperate mother and her fragile newborns. Today, their modest suburban home buzzes with activity. In what was once a rarely used guest room, 3 rescued kittens tumble over each other in a playpen, while a volunteer veterinary student checks their weight and eyes. In the living room, Arthur gently shows an elderly neighbor how to bottle feed an orphaned squirrel. And in the kitchen, Eleanor updates the social media account that has captivated thousands across the country, Messenger's Mission. The photograph she posts shows Messenger surrounded by her now-grown kittens, majestic Storm, playful Ember, watchful Patchwork, and tiny but mighty Wish. Below it, Eleanor types, "1 year ago today, a mother's desperate journey led her to our doorstep. In honor of 2 remarkable women, my daughter Sarah and Miss Abernathy, today we welcome 3 more lives into our sanctuary." The response is immediate. Hundreds of hearts, comments flowing in from followers who have been touched by this extraordinary story of grief transformed into purpose. Some share their own tales of animal rescues. Others confess to tears shed over the Matthews journey from loss to renewal. A community born from one cat's determination, from one mother's last act of love, from one family's willingness to open their door on a stormy night. Later, as twilight settles over their transformed home, now officially Sarah's sanctuary, with Miss Abernathy's weathered cat dishes displayed proudly in the entryway, Eleanor sits in the garden where memorial stones honor both women. Messenger finds her there, as she always does, pressing her warm body against Eleanor's side. "You were never just a stray, were you?" Eleanor whispers, scratching under the cat's chin. "You were a messenger in every sense of the word." From inside comes the sound of Arthur's laughter as he supervises the evening feeding frenzy, a symphony of mews and purrs that has become the soundtrack of their revitalized lives. On Eleanor's laptop, another message appears. A family 3 states away, inspired by Messenger's story, who have just saved their first litter of abandoned kittens. The tabby cat looks up at Eleanor with those knowing amber eyes, then turns her gaze to the horizon where stars begin to emerge. Some might call it coincidence, this chain of events that began with loss and ended with purpose. But Eleanor knows better. She sees the invisible threads that connect grief to healing, ending to beginning, desperation to hope. And in Messenger, once a mystery, now their heart, she sees the living embodiment of a truth as old as time itself, that the greatest journeys often begin with a single act of love. Golden afternoon light pours through the windows of Eleanor Matthews' home, transforming ordinary moments into something sacred. On the living room couch, once pristine, now adorned with a colorful quilt and the unmistakable evidence of feline residence, Eleanor sits with a leather-bound journal open in her lap. Around her, life unfolds in its most perfect form. Storm, his gray coat now sleek and magnificent, stretches luxuriously across the back of the couch, one paw dangling above Eleanor's shoulder. Ember and Patchwork have claimed the sunny windowsill, their bodies intertwined in slumber, despite the ample space for both. And Wish, still the smallest but perhaps the mightiest in spirit, sleeps curled against Eleanor's thigh, her tiny snores punctuating the peaceful silence. At Eleanor's feet rests a weathered canvas duffel bag, cleaned, mended, but preserved as a testament to the journey that changed everything. Messenger herself occupies the armchair across from them, her amber eyes half closed in contentment as she watches over her grown children with the quiet pride of a mother whose greatest work has been accomplished. Outside, birds visit the feeders that Arthur has built throughout their garden, another sanctuary that has flourished under their renewed care. Through the window, Eleanor can see him kneeling beside a young girl from the neighborhood, patiently showing her how to fill the hummingbird feeder. The child's laughter carries through the glass, a sound that no longer pierces Eleanor's heart, but instead fills it with warmth. Eleanor's pen moves across the journal page, words flowing from some deep, healed place within. Sometimes love finds us in the unlikeliest of ways, carried in muddy paws and stitched inside an old canvas bag. A year ago today, a desperate mother cat dragged her newborns to our doorstep, and in saving them, we were saved ourselves. Sarah would have called it divine intervention. Miss Abernathy might have said it was simply a cat's intuition. But I believe it was love transcending species, transcending loss, perhaps even transcending time itself. Eleanor pauses, watching as Wish stirs in her sleep, tiny paws twitching as she chases some dream mouse through fields of possibility. A smile spreads across Eleanor's face, not the careful, measured expression she had worn like armor for so many years, but something genuine that reaches her eyes and softens every line of grief that once defined her. Arthur enters quietly, taking his place beside her. No words are needed as he rests his hand atop hers, their fingers intertwining as naturally as the branches of trees that have weathered storms together and grown stronger for it. Outside, the world continues its spinning dance. Inside this home, 5 heartbeats, 2 human, 4 feline synchronize in perfect harmony. Where once there was emptiness, now there is fullness. Where there was silence, now there is purring. Where there was loneliness, now there is connection. Eleanor closes her journal, content in the knowledge that sometimes the most profound beginnings arise from the most devastating endings, and sometimes the greatest healers arrive on 4 muddy paws, carrying not just their own lives, but the promise of renewal for broken hearts brave enough to open their doors to the unexpected.